Coffee Pot Conversations.
Bonjour et bienvenue to Coffee Pot Conversations, the podcast about Paris where the point is reached gradually. This is episode 5.3, King Louis XIV, part 1. It's about the Sun King. Not going to go too much in depth on this one, but pretty much I do shut it down just as we're talking about the French wars of religion. Then it will be picked up in episode 5.4, King Louis XIV, part 2. I'll probably repeat this in the coming up section. Anyway, before heading to the news, I want to go over a couple of points with my trusty post-it note. See, I kept all the secrets away. So, first of all, I had an email from Netflix telling me that Marie Antoinette, the film with Kirsten Dunst, is back on Netflix. So that's great. I'll be watching that over the next day or two. I'm sure I've seen it before, but I don't remember all of it. So I kind of know how it ends. Also, just to say, I have now booked my trip for Paris for season 6. That's going to be happening in May. Reason being, Nev's going away on holiday for a little break, and I thought I'll take that time. It's called my Paris Days, so it's Wednesday to Friday, and I'll be there. I can't decide where to stay. I know sort of what I want to do, but just narrowing it down, I may just pick a cheap hotel, as I normally do, and travel around, hit my coffee spots, and just take it from there. That's the awkward part. I've still got a couple of arrondissements that I've not stayed in. Generally the more expensive ones. But I'll try and break through that. Anyway, that's season 6. Alright, also with season 6, which I was going to keep for coming up, but season 6 is going to contain some of what I've recorded for season 5 because of these breaks. I really should keep this for the coming up section, so I'm going to stop there. But two things. One is using Google Keep. I've moved off my iPhone onto an Android, which is what I'm using to record now. I really do need to find a camera where the lens is right in the middle of the screen, so I'm just looking at the screen rather than the camera. Although I've got a nice bit of oomph on this. Now I'm just thinking a bit of background music there. It's my favourite shop in Clapton. And now we've got a bit of music. Oh, yeah, music. That's the point. I've started looking at musical development, just for my own personal development, because you know what I'm like. I have a project, got to keep pushing myself. So I'm now looking at music, not a Press Maxim style of music by any stretch. This is more computer-generated stuff. But so that was the whole Google Keep thing, which I've started to use, take notes with. I am moving more over to the Google landscape. I've got a Fitbit, and I've been running once a week-ish, which is quite nice. And I'm now hoping that my noise reduction is working beautifully on the little microphone. Look, just see that? DJI S7 Micro connected, or Mini, connected to a little adapter in the phone, which I picked up off Amazon. No, I didn't. Picked it up off DJI, 15 quid, boom. It stops the whole lip sync issues. So, Wallace collection. It was my birthday a couple of weeks back. On the 50th. It was for my 50th. And we're doing 50 things for my 50th. And one of them is taking the boys to the Wallace collection. I'll be doing that in a week or two. They've got a Caravaggio Cupid exhibition, which I think stops in April. But going on the theme of the Wallace collection, I wanted to mention Barbara Lambesis from episode 2.1, 2.2, the Wallace Fountain Foundation Society. And she was actually on Crystal Kenny's podcast, La Vie Créative, which is where Claudine Hemingway also appears very often as a frequent regular guest. So give that one a say. That's La Vie Creative with Crystal Kenny, wherever you get your podcasts from. So that is about it. Now I'm going to pass you over to Paul with the news. Paul with the news. Thanks, Paul. First, the political gridlock at the Palais Bourbon has finally broken. After months of wrangling that cost two prime ministers their jobs, the 2026 budget is law. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu used special powers to bypass a vote, telling Parliament that the French people refuse this disorder and want a functioning state. The deal, which includes a €6 billion boost to defence, was only possible after a last-minute compromise with the socialists. In the tech world, the French headquarters of Elon Musk's X have been raided. Paris cybercrime prosecutors entered the offices yesterday as part of a widening probe into AI-generated deepfakes and the denial of crimes against humanity. Officials say they are investigating complicity in the spread of illegal content via the platform's Grok tool. On to sport, and American football is officially coming to the capital. The NFL has confirmed the New Orleans Saints will play at the Stade de France later this year. It's the first regular season game ever held on French soil as the league continues its global expansion. And finally, back to politics, the future of Marine Le Pen remains in the balance. Prosecutors in Paris have asked an appeal court to uphold a ban that will prevent her from running for the presidency in 2027, not long now. She continues to deny any wrongdoing regarding the use of EU funds. And that's the latest from Paris. My name is Paul and you're pretty much up to date. Now time for this.
Coffee pot conversations.
As I've previously mentioned a few times, or if I hadn't, I certainly should have, I'm no historian, but I do know a thing or two about research. I also know a thing or two about what I enjoy, and that is researching. But researching more about general things, not necessarily history. I like to leave that to the experts, the historians. So, for my research with this history side of this podcast, I've been looking at different aspects of France and French relations, and I've noticed a common factor of King Louis XIV, also known as the Sun King. But what is it that makes this king so popular, or at the very least well known? This has taken me down a long, long road. One where, because of the monarchy being the longest reign in history, the facts needed to be thoroughly sourced and verified. And also put in a little bite-sized chunks for me to understand and then put across to the masses that will listen to and learn from this podcast. Okay, first things first. How did Louis get to be king? It all started one rainy night in 1637. It was a wet December on the evening of the 5th, Auntie Paula's birthday. Returning from a trip, King Louis XIII and his entourage, including his wife, Anne d'Autriche, the eldest daughter of King Philip III of Spain, and his second cousin bride, Margaret of Austria, took refuge in the Louvre because that's where Queen Anne lived. December the 5th, also his birthday, But anyway, because they'd been travelling from home to home, they'd taken a large part of the furniture with them, and therefore the king did not have a bed as they ran over of unpacking time. 9 months to the day, after the king shared the queen's bed in the Louvre, Louis Dieudonné was born in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, 20 kilometres to the west of Paris, and not to be confused with Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Dieudonné incidentally means God-given, owing to the 23-year period of the royal couple trying unsuccessfully to produce an heir. Giving birth at the ripe age of 37 in those days was quite an accomplishment, and the death of the king at age 41 due to tuberculosis, the miracle son of medieval propaganda, King Louis XIV was crowned in Reims Cathedral aged 4. It's at this stage that I would normally delve deeper into the child king's upbringing, but to be honest, I'm happy to move past this part. In brief, a toddler is in charge of 19 million French subjects. France wasn't in good shape politically or financially, and with King Louis XIV's mother, along with Cardinal Jules Mazarin, also his godfather, ruling France on behalf of the king, things started to go a little whoopsie. Now, for fans of the Three Musketeers, which have a feeling I'll be coming back to in another episode, Cardinal Richelieu, who mentored Cardinal Mazarin, had policies that were all for taxation and centralisation of the monarchy. Pretty much, they wanted to take the powers away from the gentry and place it in the hands of selected citizens who had to be guided under the king's instruction and become his ministers. Italian Mazarin continued working these policies, and as a result, the Parlement of Paris rebelled against him. This showed that the nobles, legal aristocracy, provincial elites and even the common people could pose a threat to the crown and its authority. Sounds a little bit familiar, just need to wait a few hundred years. This was the Fronde. This was a series of civil war uprisings from 1648 to 1653 that tried to topple the system that was becoming the closest to absolutism any king of France had achieved. The Fronde, often divided into two main phases, the Parliamentary Fronde, 1648 to 49, and the Fronde de la Princes, 1650 to 53. The Parliamentary Fronde began with the Parlement de Paris, a High Court of Justice, challenged the absolute authority of the monarchy. They refused to register royal decrees and raised concerns about the taxation. This phase ended with a Peace of Rueil in 1649, which temporarily settled some issues, but left underlying tensions unresolved. The Fronde de la Prince was the second phase, which saw various noble factions and princes, including the Condé and the Frondeurs, rebelling against the crown. Cardinal Mazarin played a central role in this phase by shifting alliances. The Fronde had a profound impact on the king as he witnessed firsthand the dangers of a weak monarchy and vowed to strengthen royal authority. This experience shaped his determination to centralise power and control the nobility. The Fronde gradually petered out by the early 1650s as various factions grew weary of the conflict, and the royal forces gained the upper hand. The Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659... Merci, monsieur. Ah, c'est bon.
Merci. Après, je peux encaisser parce qu'on va change service.
Ah oui, non.
Merci.
Ah, merci. The Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659 ended an ongoing war with Spain and marked a significant step toward consolidating Louis XIV's power and ending the Fronde for good whilst making France Europe's most powerful kingdom. It was also under this treaty that royal marriage between Louis XIV and Marie-Thérèse of Austria was agreed upon. As I mentioned earlier, the king's mother was the daughter of King Philippe III of Spain. Marie-Thérèse of Austria was the daughter of King Philippe IV of Spain. That made the bride and groom first cousins and auntie mother-in-law, and was a good ally to the new queen. In 1661, after the death of Mazarin, King Louis XIV declared that he would rule without a chief minister. He now viewed himself as a direct representative of God, given the divine right to wield the absolute power of monarchy. This was a time when the sun became the emblem and the image of the omniscient and infallible Sun King became about. His kingdom now revolved around him. It might have been a coincidence, but King Philippe IV, this is King Louis XIV's father-in-law, was known as the Planet King. Off on one of my majestic tangents, it's been a while. King Philippe IV, despite not being a particularly successful king, promoted the arts. He was a collector, and the building and decorating of the Buen Retiro Palace is considered his greatest artistic enterprise. Velázquez and Zurbarán, both Spanish artists, as well as other greats from European countries, all had works hung there. He also hired Peter Paul Rubens, and the Hunt of Meleager, also to be seen in the Buen Retiro Palace, was painted by Paris-trained Nicolas Poussin. These are now housed at the Museo Nacional de Prado in Madrid. This is also where they hold an alternative painting of the Mona Lisa that is housed in the Louvre in Paris. Okay, here comes one more mind-blowing part. Also, in the Museo Nacional de Prado is a painting of King Philippe VI on horseback, painted by Velázquez for the Hall of Kingdoms in Madrid, now the Army Museum. In the European Army Hall, hanging on the wall in the Wallace collection, is the same painting. So keeping this going, there's also a bust of King Louis XIV sitting there in the billiard room, and to top all of this off, the Wallace collection has, naturally, a Wallace fountain right outside the gallery that houses the works collected by none other than Sir Richard Wallace of the Wallace Fountains. And again, this will no doubt be another episode for another season. I'm not sure which part, because I've already covered the Wallace Fountains in episodes 2.1 and 2.2, so it may be the Wallace collection. Or Kings, I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot to unwrap there. So we've got the War of Devolution, and back in the day, borders were different, ownership of countries was different, but taking the land was pretty much the same. However, not all land takings were equal. The local law of land inheritance in parts of Spanish Netherlands meant that the daughters of a first marriage of the monarchy took precedence over sons of future marriages. As King Louis XIV's wife just happened to be the daughter from the first marriage of King Philip IV to Elizabeth of France, rather than the son of the future marriage to Mariana of Austria, parts of Spanish Netherlands transferred from Charles II of Spain during the war. Long story short, as European wars are rarely straightforward, the English joined their alliance with the Dutch and Swiss despite French requesting English support. This was all done between May 1667 and April 1668. Without the assistance of Hugues de Lyon, the Grenoble diplomat, there would have been no diplomatic groundwork for the initiation of war. He became an advisor for foreign affairs when Mazarin became the chief minister of 4-year-old Louis. During the Fronde, Mazarin took flight to Saint-Germain and on to Le Havre, while Lyon acted as his agent in Paris. And as much as I love research, there was some serious amount of mash-up of monarchy over the years, mixing countries and families together in ways that can cause shock and literal gasps of astonishment. In trying to keep this easy to listen to and keep up with it all, I'm going to try my best and keep this short and sweet. King Henry IV, the man on the statue on the bridge, married Maria de Medici. They had 6 children. From these, 2 were King Louis XIII and Princess Isabella of France. Next door, over in Spain, King Philip III married Margaret of Austria. They had 8 children, 2 of whom were Philip IV and Anne d'Autriche. Louis XIII went with Anne, Isabella went with Philip IV. Are you keeping up? Because it gets easier from here, I promise. Louis XIII and Anne had Louis XIV, while Philip IV and Isabella had Mariana of Austria. And we know Louis XIV and Mariana went together, so the first cousins in both directions got married. But this is nothing compared to the continued incest that took place to give us King Charles II of Spain. Fortunately, this podcast is more about Paris than it is to do with the Spanish monarchy. Thankfully. So, back to the military campaigns of the Sun King, and he makes his second move against the Spanish Dutch. Having had secret talks in 1670 with England, they are now on the side of the French. King Louis uses this to his advantage, and starting in 1672, with the British Navy supporting him, mounts attacks and occupies 3 of the 7 Dutch provinces. The Dutch flood a large area around Amsterdam, and their leader, William III of Orange, takes this moment to gather his land troops. During this time, the Dutch Navy had been holding back attacks from the Allied fleets. After the 3rd successive defensive victory, England made friends with the Dutch once again and signed the Treaty of Westminster in February of 1674. Previously, in 1673, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and the area known as Lorraine all started to rally together against the French, driving them back. But this wasn't the end of it. From 1674 to 1678, France, now teaming up with Sweden, started up again, taking a route along the Rhine, defeating the Grand Alliance with rather impressive regularity. However, the cost of all of this was getting a little too much for the monarch to justify, and as England were rolling their sleeves up, readying for a re-entry into the conflict, he called it a day and signed a treatise calling an end to the Franco-Dutch War. It's here, this is a piece of academic writing, looking at the history of King Louis XIV, I began into a deeper dive regarding the Chateau de Versailles. However, the fact that there's enough for a standalone episode means that I'll do a standalone episode for the Palace of Versailles. But a succinct rundown for this section, just going to put me sugar in the coffee. A succinct rundown for this section is Louis XIV expanded from a hunting lodge to the royal official residence from 1682 until 1715, when the king died. And in the same way that Paris isn't France, the chateau isn't Versailles. I want it to be a very special extra edition should I ever venture that far out of Paris. As a graduate of religious studies, I covered the European Reformation in a bit of detail. Need to bear with me on this. Starting October 1517, it had a profound impact all over Western Europe. Martin Luther, the German, started it, and the Frenchman John Calvin played his part around 20 years later. The wider-reaching alterations of these religious changes aren't to be explored in this podcast unless there's a major call for it. But here's a rough breakdown of how it links in with the Sun King. Everything connects to the Sun King. With Calvin's intellectualism approach, the high nobles, clergy and military officers were quick to take up on the Protestant reforms. As these people were very influential within France, the monarchy of the time was tolerant of this new approach to religion. In 1560, with the first church having already been set up in the Parisian home, the combined languages of German and Flemish brought the term Huguenot to the collective of people that followed this line of thought. The Edict of Saint-Germain in January 1562 meant that, with certain restrictions, Huguenots were given rights to practice. It wasn't long until the massacre of Vassy, regardless of who instigated the situation, set in motion the French wars of religion.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
And that was episode 5.3, King Louis XIV, part 1. I'm calling it King Louis XIV because I've not actually given it a proper title at this stage of recording it. I've recorded it. I'm doing the beginning, the news, the outro, and the coming up. So it's difficult to know what I'm actually going to call it at this stage. It may just be King Louis XIV of France, Sun King, not sure. But as I did mention earlier, I did stop at the French Wars of Religion. I'll pick it up sort of from there for the next episode. Again, I've recorded, I've just cut and spliced. I know what I'm up to. I've just finished editing a 5.6, so again, that just needs to be sandwiched. So just a post-birthday wish to Jasper, my youngest, who has now hit teenage years. Struggling a little bit at the minute. Just had to email the school, say he's not coming because he's got a bit of a cough and a cold, which he picked up from rugby training a few days back, where we trained in the rain. It was horrendous. I do want him back fit and healthy, which we're not going to know because at the point of recording this, he's not played or not played on Sunday. Very meta, as is all my recordings. So what I do want to say is call to actions. It's got to be done. Email coffeepop@anenglishmaninparis.blog or the episode number 5.3 @anenglishmaninparis.blog. Tell your friends, spread the word, or tell your enemies. Waste their time. We don't care. We're a happy family show. And now that I have covered Jasper's birthday, it's time for Jasper's jingle.
Coming up on Coffee Pot Conversations.
And we have King Louis XIV Part 2, which was the second half of this episode, and we've also got Part 3, which was a separate standalone continuation. I was going to, originally it was King Louis XIV Part 2, but obviously it's now Part 3, but it's actually Part 2, Part 1, because there's no Part 2 of Part 2, so it's Part 3. Also, carrying on from there is the Académie Française, which I go over. That's a one-parter. Then I think 5 and 6 are split. I don't remember. That's really bad. I should have checked. But yeah, like I said before the conversation, it's going to be split a lot down and spread, not thinly, but bite size. Big bite, big mouth. Got to go dentist again. Anyway, so some of what I recorded in November is going to continue into next season 6, starting in July 2026. But I'm also going, as I said, back to Paris to record some more season 6, which I've not written yet. So some of that may carry on into season 7. It's all complex, all complicated, but it's all good fun. So every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, January through to May, July through to November. I don't need to tell you where to find me because you found me. So that's that. And as time ticks on and the coffee shop gets busy, Rory, it's over to you.
Coffee Pot Conversations.